is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
All right, welcome to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan Hare. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing you insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're normally here with Norma Carter, who was here on Monday, but he's back in the world making money from another job. So money changes everything. So right. we won't see him today. But we do have Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Well, welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here.
And, of course, news always breaks, long after I write my programs for this hour. And so they didn't get done with the arraignment stuff with Donald Trump until, late in the afternoon. And I had already written my program, so I'm going to do what do you call it, a cappella, when you go, do it without rehearsing. Yeah. And I really want to just help us understand what is not just what's at stake, but what the indictment actually means. There's a lot of obfuscation and confusing statements being made by a lot of people who think that they know what the legal structure is of this arraignment and the charges that are being leveled against Donald Trump. There's a lot of people who are for or against that are saying things that are mildly true, but also mildly confusing, if not untrue. Especially the attorneys that are representing Donald Trump. They are really off the wall in terms of their characterization of things. Let me just help us understand the basics. I know we got a caller coming on. We'll grab that caller in just a second. Let me just help us understand what the basics are. The basics are that Donald Trump was apparently contacted by Stormy Daniels, either directly or through her attorney, saying that even though he had signed or she had signed a non-disclosure agreement, which apparently Trump himself never signed, or at least they don't have a copy of the signed non-disclosure agreement. But the idea was that Trump was going to be able to count on Stormy Daniels not revealing any sexual relationship between her and him in return for a payment. And the payment was $130,000. So the assertion is that Trump got Michael Cohen, who is an attorney and they refer to him as Trump's fixer, got Michael Cohen to make the actual payment to Stormy Daniels' attorney. That money supposedly went to her, and that doing that was illegal. Well, that's not by itself, what I just said is not actually illegal. If you took your personal money and you gave it to an attorney, and the attorney took that money and paid it to somebody else to keep you quiet, that's a personal foible, and it's a little bit sleazy, but it's not necessarily illegal. Here's how it becomes illegal. Trump had another corporation invented that had never existed before, like Excelsior or something or other, a corporation, and then had the payments that were the money that he actually took from his own account. He had that money put into this corporation that he just invented, and then had that corporation pay that money back to Michael Cohen for the money that he paid to Stormy Daniels, if that makes sense to you. What that shows is an intent to deceive, an intent to hide the expenditure, that it was not what it was on its face to be. So that's the first part of it. Second part of it is that Excelsior Corporation that Trump invented, how did it file its tax returns? Does its tax returns show that money as income to the Excelsior Corporation and then as an expense to the Excelsior Corporation on the tax return filed for that corporation in 2016? If that's the case, you can't get a tax deduction for a personal expense. If Trump incurred $130,000 in expense for the a price he had to pay to Stormy Daniels through whatever mechanisms that he set up, but this was a personal expense, you can't charge it to your business as a business expense. But apparently Trump charged this as a legal expense, not only to his Excelsior Corporation, but somehow the Trump Organization, which is his main company, it comes up in their records as a legal expense. If it's charged as a legal expense when they file their tax returns, then it becomes included as a reduction of your taxable income. If you reduce your taxable income by $130,000 and you're in a 25% tax bracket, then you're talking about something in the area of $30,000 in taxes that you wound up not having to pay on that income. That's illegal. I mean, that's just on the face of it. So when all of these charges, do we still have that caller hanging on?
No caller. That was
Oh, that was one of your personal calls.
Yeah, that's paying for the college.
We can't. We got to tell them that you're not on the air. You can't come to you just because they know you're on the air. So the point that I'm trying to get to is that the assertions that are being made by Trump's defense is that he never actually took a tax deduction for the $130,000 on the basis that when he filed his tax returns, he didn't include that on his tax returns. Well, that's a fact assertion that needs to be evidence. In other words, you should be able to go to Trump's 2016 tax returns and see if there's $130,000 plus, maybe more than that, as I'm pretty sure he paid Michael Cohen a little bit more than $130,000 that he passed on to Stormy Daniels. They probably paid Michael Cohen just to shut him up, make sure that he didn't become a tattletale. And so the point that I'm trying to get to here is that the attorneys for Donald Trump are asserting that even though Trump made this payment to Stormy Daniels, he's saying that, number one, Trump didn't have a sexual relationship with Stormy Daniels, which seems weird because if you didn't, why would you be paying her? If you were doing this just to shut her up, how many other people could raise their hands and say, I'm cute, I was near Donald Trump, I say I had a sexual relationship with him too, give me some money. It seems like you would be unwinding yourself if you approach your legal defense that way. But the core point is, if that money was the money was definitely paid, Donald Trump has admitted that the money was paid through him to Stormy Daniels. So that's a fact. What they refer to as fact evidence that Alvin Bragg talked about yesterday at the press conference after the arraignment. The fact evidence is clear. Trump did pay this money out of his funds. He paid that money to Stormy Daniels. The issue isn't whether or not he paid the money to Stormy Daniels. The issue is, how was that money characterized for tax purposes? Was that money characterized as a business expense? Now, where they get the idea of it being charged as or cited as a legal expense is from Trump's own records. His own tax returns apparently talk about this expense as a legal expense. If it was a legal expense, then it would be a business expense. If it's a business expense, it would have been deducted from the income of that business. If it was deducted from the income from that business, it means that you didn't pay any taxes on that money. But it's illegal for you to not pay taxes on personal expenses. Those are deductions from your personal income, but you can't get a tax deduction for it because you're not allowed to take a tax deduction for your personal income. If you buy a Maserati, you don't get a tax reduction because you bought a Maserati, and so on. So that's what is really up to bat. Now, there were other things that were talked about I mean, you remember that, Willie, that the big issue was this is just a misdemeanor, and you got to find a way to bicycle this misdemeanor up into a felony by, showing that the misdemeanor was committed with the intent to commit another crime that was a felony.
Right.
That's the story that they gave us. But that's not what Alvin Bragg brought yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
He brought 34 charges. Wow. Every single one of them was a felony.
He's out to get Trump.
Right. We have to worry about trying to pump something up from being a misdemeanor to a felony. Every charge was a felony. Right. Now, do all of these charges stick? I don't know. I don't have enough detail from the fact sheets that they gave us. I don't have enough detail to know for certain.
And probably not. That's why the guy was sticking all of them. He's saying one of these going to stick. I know Trump can get out of stuff, but something here should stick.
Something is going to, right, because as I've indicated here, it's a little bit convoluted, but it's not as convoluted as they try to make it sound. The fact is that Stormy Daniels got $130,000 out of Donald Trump's pocket and put it into her pocket. That's a fact. He said that, so you don't have to contest that.
Right.
He said that.
Right.
The question is, how was that documented? Now, he didn't have to document anything. He could have just wrote a personal check from himself to her, but he didn't want to do that because he didn't want his wife to know that he had paid this money to Stormy Daniels, because then he'd have to explain, well, why are you paying this money to Stormy Daniels? Who is Stormy Daniels? Blah, 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 right? And so to hide the true intent of the expenditure, he created subterfuge. So part of the subterfuge was having Michael Cohen make the payment rather than for Donald Trump to make the payment. So he did that. But then he had to excuse me, Michael Cohen had to come up with the money, the $130,000, and even though he was a lawyer, he didn't necessarily have $130,000 in available cash that he could spend to cover Donald Trump's expenses. So he went to his home, his homeowner line of, I think it's an equity line of credit they refer to it. In other words, he has a home that has a certain amount of equity value, and he borrowed against that equity.
Who, Mr. Cohen did?
Cohen did that.
Okay.
And that's where he got the original money, the $130,000 that he sent to Stormy Daniels.
Wow.
But of course, he's going to go back to Donald Trump and say, listen, I don't be paying interest on this. I borrowed this money for you. I got to pay interest and principal on this money I borrowed for you. You got to make this, go away quickly.
Right.
So Donald Trump said, well, we got to spread it out, over a period of time. So, to make it look like it was actual legal expenses. So I'm going to pay you lump sums every month over the course of the next 8 or 9 months. And that's what he did.
I got to say this, though, Mr. Hare. I look at Mr. Trump and I say to myself, wow, this guy plans for everything. He knows this. He knows how to work the system. Even that orchestration of how he said, okay, I don't want my wife to know. Let me get this guy, and then that guy pay, and then I'll pay him. He got the system down pat. So.
Remember, if you're a crook, you've worked out all the little angles that go on with crooked stuff, right?
You prepare even before it come up. Like, okay, here's how we're going to come.
See, a lot of you in the audience, you're like, what are you talking about? That's just too much drama and whatnot. But that's because you're not a crook.
Right.
See, if you were a crook, this is what you do for a living, know, right? So Donald Trump is scheming.
Right.
So he has now has to pay Michael Cohen. So he books this as, lump sum payments that add up to more than $130,000 that he paid to Michael Cohen over an 8 or 9 month period.
Right.
So now, how did that get treated? Apparently, his checkbook, where you put on the stub, what you are making this check for. Apparently, on the checkbook, it was listed as a legal expense. I don't know if it was listed as a legal expense on the actual general ledger for the corporation. I don't know. I don't have that image in front of me. But I get the sense that that's what occurred, that it was listed as a legal expense. But it was not a legal expense to the Trump organization. It was a legal expense to the corporation that Donald Trump had created. So after this thing came up with him and Stormy Daniels, he created a corporation. And when you got money, you can get a corporation created pretty created pretty quickly.
Or you can have a lot of rich people, they know people in business, so they can
just knock it out. Boom, within a day, they got a corporation.
Right.
And then he had income going to that corporation. That's money that came from Donald Trump. And then he had expenses that were charged as legal expenses to that corporation. So the corporation probably paid no taxes, because all of the money that came in went out, as legal expenses.
That's correct.
At least that's my sense of it. So that's the basic schema. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that when you do all of these things, you wind up having to commit other violations of tax law or corporate law, to do all these little tactical things that Trump was doing.
Right.
So I'm not going to go through all of the litany of that stuff. I just wanted you to understand what the actual basis is of the charges against Donald Trump. The charge is that Donald Trump disguised deliberately money that he paid to Stormy Daniels, disguised those payments as business expenses, and in doing so, he avoided any tax liability on those expenses. And I want to go one step further on his tax liability. When that money was paid to Michael Cohen, charged as legal expenses to Michael Cohen, then that means that was income to Michael Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
Did Michael Cohen show that income on his tax returns for 2016? Right. It doesn't seem like that's what occurred. Let me go one step further. Stormy Daniels, the porn star that's being imaged as Miss Innocent. You remember Miss Innocent, right? Miss Innocent, the porn star? Never mind. No. But that $130,000 went into her hands. Did that show up as income on her tax returns? See,
it'd be interesting to know to find out all that stuff to see if they actually. Probably none of them filed.
Exactly. So the reason why this turned into 34 different felony charges is that there's so many different laws that intersect. That when you violate one, you're violating another. That it turned into this menagerie of 34 different felony level charges.
Right.
First thing, it vacates the issue that the media has been talking about for weeks, that, these were the most trivial charges that could have been done against Donald Trump. Why did they start with this first? It's not really a big deal. It's just a misdemeanor, and you can't make it a felony unless you can find a felony offense that the misdemeanor was committed in furtherance of, and so on. That's the assertion that the media, obviously Trump supporters, but the media has all signed on to this, even today. They still have been repeating this, even though that's not the theory of the prosecution. Well, the issue is vacated because there are no misdemeanors being charged by Alvin Bragg's district attorney's office. What's being charged are 34 felonies. Every one of those felonies is carrying somewhere between a 3 and 20-year sentence. Every one of them. Mm. Now, you notice, Willie, because I know, you have a little liberal kind of, edge on you and whatnot. That's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Nobody's throwing stones at you, but, you are a bit of a liberal.
Thank you.
And that liberal part of you makes you not talk about, what was I about to go into there?
I must not be that liberal.
I was trying to mess with you, and I lost my train of thought. Okay, I'm gonna let that go for right now, right? But I wanted to get that understanding out to us that's what's really at play here. Is the core issue is I know what I wanted to mention was that there was another incident. It wasn't just the I think her name was Karen McDougal was the other woman that Trump was supposedly sleeping with.
Another one. Wow.
Yeah, that's it. That's in these charges too. In other words, payments were made to her. And so the same fact scenario that I gave you about the payments and the characterization of the payments to Stormy Daniels also applied to this Karen McDougal. Wow. She got paid off more money. She got more than $130,000. And, how was that money characterized? Did she file it on her income tax return as income to her?
Right.
Was it money that came from the Trump organization? Did it come from this Excelsior company? Did the money come out of Trump's direct account?
Right.
Apparently that didn't occur. The check from either the Trump organization or the Excelsior Corporation that went to McDougal and it went to Daniels, the checks, plural, were signed by Donald Trump. So he can't say he didn't know about these things because he signed these things. Of course, Trump's attorney says, well, he's the CEO of a company and, he's the one that signs the checks and he gets checks thrown in front of him all the time. He didn't necessarily know what he was signing for. I promise you, being a CEO for 45 years in my life, I promise you, that excuse does not hold up.
Right. That's correct.
You can't tell the court, well, I signed this stuff, but I didn't know what I was signing. The court's going to say, well, that's your problem. Part of the fine or the sentence that you're going to have dropped on you is because you didn't do the due diligence to know what you were signing. Right. That's on you. And so that's the assertion that I'm making here. But one more case was discussed, discussed a lot, but probably will get discussed a lot over the course of the next few days. Is that I think it was a male witness asserted that he tried to get some money out of Donald Trump to keep quiet about a child that Trump had out of wedlock. I don't know if you heard about this.
Didn't hear about that one.
Now, they claim that this was discussed in the media in that, 2017, 2019 time period. I don't recall that. And I'm a student of the media. I don't recall that discussion going on at all. But whether it was or it wasn't, if it turned out that money was paid to somebody to shut up whoever it was that Trump had this out of wedlock baby by, that just creates more evidence that Trump was doing things illegally. He was taking personal expenses, applying them to his business, letting his businesses take deductions for those expenses, characterizing these things as a business as opposed to personal. In addition to that, these payments happen within the last, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks of the presidential campaign in 2016. So remember, you had that tape. They call it the Access Hollywood video that shows Trump running his mouth, talking about how he could stick his tongue, in the back of a woman's throat, and that she'd never say anything because he's a star, right. And he could grab a woman by her private parts, right. I mean, talking so disrespectfully, even if you believe that.
Right. Well, he's got the mentality that I can do anything I want to.
Precisely.
We all know as a rich man that he's did a lot of legal stuff.
And that's what he said in that Access Hollywood tape. He said, I can do anything I want to do because I'm a star.
Because he's been doing it almost probably all his life. He's seen it done. He's around other billionaires that do the same thing. So,
So because these things happen near the end of the campaign, the presidential campaign, it's being viewed by Alvin Bragg and others. It's being viewed as something that was being done to keep this stuff out of the public attention during the last, week or two of the campaign, because that may have shaved off 1 or 2% of Donald Trump's vote. And if he had lost 1 or 2% of the vote that he got, he wouldn't have become the president in 2016. Hillary Clinton would have been the president in 2016. Mm-hmm. So because of that, it can be viewed as a campaign expense. Now, to me, this gets a little bit distorted because you have to have a lot of assumptions go your way in order for this to be turned into a campaign expense. Mm-hmm. But that's what's being asserted, right now. But what I find most intriguing in terms of the strategy that Alvin Bragg has used is that he didn't base everything on the campaign finance issue. He brought the campaign finance issue into the equation, but he didn't frame everything around that. He framed everything around, you spent this money. We know you spent the money. We know who you spent the money with. We know how you characterize the expense because we have it in your handwriting, how you characterize the expense. And so he's going from there to what laws were broken in the course of these machinations that were engaged in by Donald Trump. And I think that puts him on a stronger footing than just the issue of whether or not you believe that it was a campaign expense in the last 2 weeks of the 2016 presidential race. Does that make sense, how I tried to characterize that?
Yes, that makes sense. And you know what? Another thing I noticed when I'm looking at the indictment, it says Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of New York, the people of the State of New York against the Trump Corporation, DBA, the Trump Organization,
right.
Trump Payroll Corporation, the Trump of Organization, Allen something. But anyway, basically,
all of those are these legal constructs
right.
that Trump created,
right.
and all of them had these dollars pass through them,
right.
or some of these dollars pass through
right.
each one of those things.
Right.
So you can see that Trump was manipulating tax law. He was manipulating corporate law. He was manipulating how you characterize what would you call business records,
right.
how you characterize business records and so on, for the purpose of deceiving people. And that's really what Trump is
right.
being caught up on.
Who's Alan Weisselberg? Do you know who that is?
I
must be one of his lawyers or something.
Weisselberg? He must be somebody that works for the Trump Organization.
He's against, they're against him too. So
right.
Must be.
Right. So he would have been somebody who the dollars would have had to pass through or
right.
or were recorded by. In other words, somebody had to record this in the books of that corporation as being this kind of an expense versus another kind of an expense. Whoever did that has to be responsible for that characterization. So if you took something that was a personal expense and you put it on the books of a corporation as a business expense, as a legal expense, and it wasn't, then that's deception on your part. So you have to run to Donald Trump and say, they're accusing me of being deceptive, and I'm being deceptive for you, so you have to take responsibility for this deception.
Right.
Right. So it's convoluted, but it's not as convoluted as they're trying to make it sound. Right. There's a lot of substance, to this thing. I find it interesting though that when Donald Trump talks about Jack Smith, the special prosecutor for the Justice Department investigating the Mar-a-Lago, theft of presidential records, he refers to him, as some hyper, vigilante type of a prosecutor. But when he talks about Alvin Bragg, he's an animal. He's a criminal. His wife is, low life, and so on. When do you ever attack somebody's wife?
Right.
Right.
right. What? Right.
See. So,
yeah.
but the charge, the characterization of Trump's charges against the African people, Fannie Willis and Alvin Bragg, are all personal.
Right.
It's Fannie Willis is a racist. She's a witch. And so on. Right. Trump is, or Alvin Bragg is an animal. He's a criminal.
Right.
Everybody else is, an over-aggressive, politician, somebody who's, stridently political, and so on. Those are not impersonal characterizations. But the characterizations of the black people who are in these prosecutorial positions are all personal, right? Nobody's talking about that.
Right.
Right.
And he worded that way so that, his supporters, now they become immediate enemies of his supporters.
I expect Marjorie Taylor Greene to come to a rally with a big animal poster behind her head and say, Alvin Bragg, animal, and so on, right? Because, I'm licensed to say it now because I'm repeating what Trump said.
Right.
It's that sort of stuff. So I want to take a bit of time and talk a little bit about, I know we only got a minute in this segment. We're going to take about 10 minutes in the next segment to talk about the other big charges that are facing Donald Trump. He's got to me, the most fundamentally big charge is the theft of all of these records from the White House that were transferred to Mar-a-Lago by Donald Trump. Evidence shows, and we'll talk about this, that Donald Trump didn't just know about it, he actually went through the boxes of records and made sure he could get the particular records he wanted to be kept, to have them sorted out and not transferred back to the National Archives and Records Administration. So we're going to get on that in just a bit, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Wisconsin, which is an important judicial race, and we'll get into it. So thank you all for listening. We'll look forward to talking to you on this side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you in a second.
Love bugs and companions. They are our pets, our family, and they make life better. When we face unexpected challenges, so do our pets. That's why we're on a mission to support people and their pets. Whether donating a bag of kibble, sharing an Instagram post of a lost cat, or welcoming a foster pet into your home, every bit of kindness counts. Visit petsandpeopletogether.org to learn how to be a helper in your community. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo.
All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Willie H., who's doing the live streaming of the program. I just wanted to read something to you from an article that was structured to talk a little bit about. I'm flipping here. Yeah, it was. This is in Personal Finance. Trump lawyer may get a tax break from the $130,000 Stormy Daniels payment. I went to this one because the article was written in 2016. So it wasn't written in the glow of all of the hullabaloo about Donald Trump right now. It's a little bit more objective. And basically what the article talks about in a section that talks about deducting legal costs, it says that the owner of a business that made, say, a payment such as what was made to Stormy Daniels could try to argue that the settlement is an ordinary and necessary business expense and is deductible. But whether the owner of a company can argue that depends on whether the legal matter itself is a personal or related to the business. If it's personal, you can't deduct it. If it's related to the business, you can. There are tax cases in which someone will argue they had to spend $1 million on legal expenses because of a nasty divorce was threatening the business. But no matter if you're trying to protect the business, if the genesis is personal, you can't deduct it. And that's what the article is trying to get to. So if Donald Trump in one of his corporations deducted this so-called legal expense from the income or from the income of any one of those various corporations or any individual, that would make it not only illegal, it makes it a felony, crime. So let me just quickly talk a little bit about Mar-a-Lago. The investigators have used emails and text messages from a former Trump aide to help understand what was going on with this trove of documents that Trump had secreted away and stored on his property at Mar-a-Lago. It says that the obstruction elements of the case, whether the former president took or directed actions to impede government efforts to collect the sensitive records, is what's at stake. That's what Jack Smith is investigating right now. He's not investigating whether or not Trump took the documents. They already know that Trump took the documents. What they're investigating is, did Trump obstruct the governmental administration or the ability to administer government? Did he obstruct it, by doing things to hide documents and not let people know the documents existed, even once the documents were identified as being in his possession, to bring the documents back, lying about the fact that he had given up all of the documents when he hadn't. All of those things are a part of this investigation between the Justice Department and Donald Trump. The emphasis on obstruction marks a key distinction into how much a smaller amount of classified documents ended up in an insecure office of President Biden. So the first thing the Republicans have done is said, well, Joe Biden had some presidential documents that were in his possession. That's true. But Joe Biden didn't obstruct the investigation to access those documents. Once it was brought to his attention that those documents existed, he then immediately executed, a process to get those documents back into the hands of the National Archives and Records Administration. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has done everything in his power to not do that, to hide documents, to avoid giving the documents up, to pretend that he had given documents that he hadn't given, and so on. Biden's lawyers say they have quickly handed over all classified documents found in Biden's possession. Jack Smith is trying to determine if Trump or others mishandled national security documents and if there is enough evidence to ask a grand jury to charge him with obstructing the investigation. There are 4 separate criminal charges related to that are related to Donald Trump that are major. I think there are other charges that are also looming, but one of them, of course, is the Stormy Daniels charge we talked about already. Another is Trump being investigated by the Justice Department and a state prosecutor in Georgia, Fannie Willis, over efforts to block Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election. He's also being investigated in Georgia for his attempt to persuade Georgia's Secretary of State to contrive, and Willie, you talk about this all the time, 11,701 votes. That's all I need. I just need you telling me you can't find 11,000? You have 5 million votes in Georgia. You couldn't find 11,701 votes for me?
I think that was probably one of the most criminal to me.
Mafioso type criminal, right? Yeah. But that wasn't the only one. I didn't get this one down in time to put it into this document, but this also happened in Wisconsin. Wow. He went to election officials in Wisconsin and said, I need this race. I need for you all to work this out. What's taking so long? I invited you all to come down to Mar-a-Lago. You had lunch with me and whatnot. Let's get moving and whatnot, right? I mean, Trump was just, acting like a mob boss, and that these people were his flunkies. Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung said in a written statement, "The witch hunts against President Trump have no basis in facts or law. The deranged special counsel," that's what they called Jack Smith, the deranged special counsel, have now resorted to prosecutorial misconduct by illegally leaking information to corrupt the legal process and weaponize the justice system in order to manipulate public opinion and conduct election interference, because they are clearly losing across the board. Now, notice that Trump is continually throwing this election interference stuff on the table. Right. He does that because the premise in the 2020 race was that you can't talk about the stuff that Trump is doing because, he's the sitting president. And, you can't indict, a sitting president. They essentially said you can't even go through the investigation process. Right. With a sitting president, because you interfere with his ability to conduct his duties as president. But then when the race was over, he lost the race. They still didn't, because you still had William Barr for the last 2.5 months as the attorney general for the country. And so they didn't pick up the investigation after that point. When Biden came in, they didn't jump on that investigation right away. They took their time, getting other aspects of their administration up and running. And so a lot of time went by, and as time goes by, people forget. And people's motivation for doing things begins to wane if time goes by. Right. So that's what happened here. But this election interference stuff, they kept throwing this stuff on the table so that it would seem like, Well, if you're investigating Donald Trump at all, prosecuting Donald Trump at all, you're interfering with the presidential election for 2024. If you play this game, you're going to be in election interference from now until November. It's never going to be a time when there's no election on the horizon when you're doing an in-depth investigation of something. So according to dictionary.com, this term witch hunt that Donald Trump continues to throw on the table, according to dictionary.com, a witch hunt is an intensive inquiry originally or purportedly to discover and expose dishonesty, subversion, or other wrongdoing, the scope and conclusions of which often include and bring harm to innocent persons or their reputations through reliance on hearsay or circumstantial evidence. It's the reliance on hearsay and circumstantial evidence that makes the thing a witch hunt. If you're relying on things that are absolutely known facts, Donald Trump wrote a check out of his pocket and gave the money to Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen wrote a check out of his pocket and gave the money to Stormy Daniels. Michael Cohen said that he was reimbursing Trump for legal expenses. Trump put down on some corporate ledger that these were legal expenses that corporation was paying to Donald or to Michael Cohen. All of those are fact statements that were not facts, right? They were evidence of steps engaged in to commit a crime. So the fact that Trump reimbursed Michael Cohen for payments that he made to Stormy Daniels is not hearsay. Trump admitted to that fact. The hundreds of classified documents and thousands of national records stolen or hoarded by Trump are not in dispute. Trump is heard on a phone call with at least two other listeners seeking to persuade Brad Raffensperger to throw the Georgia election from Joe Biden to Donald Trump. These are all facts. These are not things that are in dispute, right? So it can't be a witch hunt. How can it be a witch hunt when the fact that you are investigating is not even in dispute? You know, all you're trying to determine is whether or not there was intent. You know, there was a legal or a legally enforceable perception of intent behind the actions that you took. But the actions that you took are not in dispute. They're concretely evidenced. Trump claimed that Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server when she was Secretary of State was worse than anything that ever happened at Mar-a-Lago. Trump is the only the only leader fighting for the Constitution. This is his own words. And this is Trump speaking, and he's referring to himself as President Trump. You know how we feel about these people that refer to themselves in the third person, right? You know, there's something on your rocker that's not off, that's not on, rather. Right. President Trump is the only leader fighting for the Constitution and to protect the American people from being abused by those who want to destroy our system of government. If anybody's trying to destroy our system of government, it's Donald Trump. He's the one that says that the oversight committees don't have any teeth. They can't subpoena any records. He doesn't have to allow any of his executive department officials to testify before Senate or House of Representatives investigations or committees and so on. Trump is the one doing that stuff. Trump is the one that is refusing to disclose documents that we know are in his possession, but he doesn't want those documents to be reviewed by the oversight committee, so he just refuses to turn the documents over. Trump is doing that stuff. That's what's eroding the very structure of American democracy, because American democracy it depends not just on the written law, it also depends upon the unwritten customs that have characterized the way business is done. You know, there used to be a time when you would not see anybody swearing at somebody or, you know, getting loud with somebody in the Senate of the Capitol building, because the Senate was considered to be this austere chamber. You serve for 6 years at a time. People frequently serve 3 or 4 or 5 terms, you know, serve 24, 30 years, you know, in the Senate. Everybody was just very gentlemanly with each other. They had these very set protocols and customs and so on. When a election was done and a person from a different party wins the election, you still turned over all your records and you met with the transition team of the incoming administration, and everybody was just real nice with each other. Everything was all cool. Well, that didn't happen with Donald Trump, did it? Donald Trump broke all of those norms and so on, right? But now he's the one claiming that it's the Biden administration that is threatening our system of government. In the classified documents case, federal investigators have gathered new and significant evidence that after the subpoena was delivered, Trump looked through. This is important. After the subpoena that was delivered, I think it was in July or early August of 2022, after that subpoena was delivered that allowed the Justice Department to do the search at Donald Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago, after that occurred, Trump looked through the documents of some of the boxes that were still in his home, and apparently out of a desire to keep certain things in his possession, according to people familiar with the investigation, he went through those documents and he took some documents out and had some of the documents in his desk. You can't say that he did not know that these documents were in his possession. You can't say that he did not deliberately try to keep those documents for his own purposes, whatever his purposes are. I'm not saying that his purposes were treason or anything like that. I'm saying that whatever his reasons were, they were personal. They didn't have anything to do with the administration of the government of the United States. He kept these things for his own purposes, not for the business purpose of the government of the United States, and that's illegal. You don't have the right to do that. And we're not just talking about the classified documents. Every document that Donald Trump had that had the presidential seal on it was a federal record. It was a document that belonged to the federal government on behalf of the people of the United States. They belong in the National Archives and Records Administration. If you wanted to access those documents, you go to the National Archives and Records Administration and say, I need to access this document. I'm going to read it here, or I need for you to give me a copy of it, or let me take this document home so I can do whatever it is that I'm going to do, and I'll get it back to you next Tuesday. That's what you would do, but that's not what Donald Trump was doing, because he had different reasons for why he was doing what he did. He was afraid that some of the stuff that's in those documents, somebody would see and find out that Donald Trump was not as canny a person as he tried to pretend that he was. He was not as friendly to the interests of the United States as he tried to pretend, that he was. There was a lot of stuff going on, with Donald Trump that he didn't want to be disclosed. And I think that's what was at the bottom of this stuff. Trump's team returned some of the documents with classified markings in response to the subpoena, but a later FBI search found more than 100 additional classified documents. When I went through these things, it came out to be something like 425 different classified documents that Trump had in his possession. They're talking about laws that were that were violated. Well, in the material that has been provided so far by the Justice Department, they're saying that violations of statutes include Statute 18 of the U.S. Code 1519, which makes it a crime to alter, destroy, mutilate, or conceal a document or tangible object with the intent to impede, obstruct, or influence the investigation or proper administration of any matter within the jurisdiction of any department or agency. Trump clearly was doing that. He was hiding and maybe even destroying documents that belong to the federal government. Can I just quickly, because I know we only got about 10 minutes, talk about the race in Wisconsin?
Go for it.
I went to an article written by Sean Johnson. In a Supreme Court case with no other, or like no other, Wisconsin's political future is up for grabs. This was published by Wisconsin Public Radio. An election on Tuesday could change the political, and this is the election that took place yesterday, could change the political trajectory of Wisconsin, a perennial swing state. What did my note here say? Oh yeah, because this election went to the Democrats, it means that the Democrats now have a one-vote majority on that Wisconsin State Supreme Court, and so they're able to now do some things. For example, the 1849 law that had been passed in Wisconsin that made all abortion illegal, that is going to be vacated, and they're going to have to come up with a different kind of piece of legislation that would be acceptable to a more liberal oriented state Supreme Court. That's important. We have environmental regulations that are at stake. We got clean energy regulations that are at stake, and so on. The race comes at a critical time in Wisconsin with a challenge to the state's pre-Civil War abortion ban already working its way through the court. The stakes of the race go beyond a single issue, however. Should liberals win control of the court for the first time since 2008, they're going to be able to hear a challenge to Wisconsin's Republican-drawn redistricting maps, which have helped cement conservative priorities for more than a decade. What we're talking about here is, in Wisconsin, I think that there are, if I'm not mistaken, there are 12 or 16, I think it's 12 districts that are congressional districts in their state. Because Wisconsin's not a really big state in terms of population, but they got 12 congressional districts in that state. The way the population is laid out, about 2/3 of the population is in places like Madison, Wisconsin, urban centers. And the rest of the state is very, very rural. So what the Republicans have done is they've divided up the state into districts in which the conservative Republican-oriented voters have the distinct majority in at least 2/3 of the districts, even though they only have 1/3 of the population. Does that make sense the way I said that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So these districts that have 1/3 of the population have two-thirds of the legislators. So they've always been able to have legislation structured, and this is also true in their state assembly and their state state senate. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, you've had a very conservative minority rule over the majority in a population in the state of Wisconsin. Getting the Supreme Court justice race to go to a Democrat rather than a Republican means that there's going to be the ability to appeal the structure of those district lines in Wisconsin, have new lines drawn that are much fairer than the ones that exist right now. So you wouldn't end up with, the minority population ruling over the majority population in that state. So these are really big things that are underway, and these are the Republicans, of course, are framing the race in terms of what they could lose, which they contend includes the key pillars of former Republican Governor Scott Walker's legacy. I don't know if you all remember Scott Walker. Kind of had an odd look on his face, like he didn't know if he was actually looking at you when he was looking. But he was the author of a lot of these very rigid conservative kinds of practices in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Republicans are concerned about, that those things are going to get turned around. Well, they should get turned around because those were the priorities of the 1/3 minority in Wisconsin. The 2/3 majority in Wisconsin didn't want those things, but they couldn't stop these things from happening because of the gerrymandering of these election districts. So then you got the abortion rights and gerrymandering issue. On a recent Saturday night in Madison, people lined up and down the street outside a place called the Barrymore Theater for a live recording of the show Pod Save America. The host, speechwriters who work for former President Barack Obama, hold celebrity status in Madison, which is a Democratic stronghold that's proven critical in victories in Wisconsin. This show is aimed at turning out the Democratic vote for Milwaukee County Judge Janet Protasevich in her race, which again took place yesterday, against former Supreme Court Justice Dan Kelly. The election boiled down to the issue of abortion rights and the gerrymandering issue. Abortion has been a major issue in Wisconsin since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe versus Wade and reinstated a long dormant abortion ban, first written in 1849. I find this interesting that a law that was written in 1849 is being rebirthed in Wisconsin based on last year's abortion decision in Dobbs versus well, I just call it the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court that vacated or essentially overturned Roe versus Wade.
So, Mr. Hare, we got a caller.
Oh, great. Let's get that call real quick. Hi, caller. Are you there?
Hi, Mr. Hare. This is just very quickly CNN saying this morning Democratic-backed Janet, and I don't know how to pronounce her last name, Janet will win Wisconsin Supreme Court election.
Yeah, it's Protasevich. Yeah, I heard it this morning that she won that race.
Flipping majority control in liberals' favor in what would be considered the most important or consequential election of the year, with abortion access, election rules, and more on the line. So this will affect abortion in the state of Wisconsin
not
directly?
only in the state of Wisconsin, because remember, this is going to the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court. So what the Republicans have been doing is using the conservative control of the state Supreme Court to keep driving cases up the appellate line until they got heard before the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court would always do what the Republican conservatives wanted to have done. So if they wanted people to have apples on their heads before they have sex, then everybody had to have an apple on their head because that's what they said they wanted, right? Yes. So having this liberal justice, Janet Protasevich, to having her there would mean that the Democrats would have the majority vote on the state Supreme Court, and so those kind of decisions would end. In addition to that, the likelihood is Wisconsin will then, its legislature will then put forward legislation to guarantee the right of abortion to anybody who wants that right under certain circumstances. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't want you to kill somebody that can walk, right. And so on. But, right. Let's say it's up to 22 weeks, whatever their parameters are. But that right to abortion would be reaffirmed. And because it would be reaffirmed by state law passed by the state legislature, even the federal Supreme Court would not be able to overturn that law because it was in the sovereign right of that state to be able to pass a law on that measure. But it doesn't just end there, because you have congressional districts in that state. If right now there are 12 congressional districts, that means 12 congressmen for that state. If 8 of those congress people are now Republican conservatives and only 4 are Democrats and progressives, if they change the district lines to make the lines reflect the population spread in Wisconsin, you could likely have 8 Democratic progressive Congress people, because remember, the Congress runs every 2 years. So you could have 8 Congress people from the Democrat-Republican side of the equation. You could have that versus 4 conservatives. If that took place, then you'd have 4 more Democratic Congress people. If you had 4 more Democratic Congress people right now, then the Democrats would have control of the House of Representatives right now, just from that one race in Wisconsin. So,
and it would be overcoming Wisconsin's 1849 law that bans abortion.
As far as 18, because the thing with that law is normally if a law was passed at a time in the past when people understood the world differently than they understand the world today, you couldn't just resurrect the law because of some Supreme Court decision. You would have to go to your you'd have to go to your state legislature, and you'd have to have that law either reaffirmed or have that law rewritten and modified or have the law vacated. But you wouldn't just be able to take the same law and just because the Supreme Court made a decision, you automatically enforce a law that you had not been enforcing for 160 years. That just wouldn't make any sense. But it does make sense in Republican conservative America. Now you don't have to bother, going to the state legislature. You can say, well, Wild Bill Hickok and Jesse James, they were shooting this out in 1849, and this is what they decided then, with their pea shooters and whatnot. Well, how can that trap people in 2023? A decision that was made in 1849. Wouldn't you have to come back to your legislature and determine whether or not that's the law you want to govern the state by right now? especially given how much has taken place over the course of that time period. So this is the unjust, tyrannical way that this conservative Republican minority have been trapping and running the politics of America for at least the last 15, 20 years, but much more so now even than 15, 20 years ago. And it's just gotten so far out of hand, but it's on Americans. Americans have to step up and start voting like they mean it, and not just voting, when they just feel something hurt. You got to vote before it hurts, so you don't get hurt. Right.
Thanks for covering this. I know we're getting very low on time.
Yep.
Hope to speak to you soon. Have a great day.
All right. Take care. Talk to you soon, James.
You too.
So, yep. So that's the deal. So money is poured into that race, doubling by one estimate. According to the Brennan Center, the old record of $15.2 million spent in a Supreme Court race in 2004 has been broken. One result says that there was $29 million spent in this race. Another result says, I think it was Wisconsin Politics, found spending at a level of $45 million for this race with Janet, and I have a real hard saying her name, just as James did, Protasevich. I think I'm saying that right. So listen, folks, we had a lot of stuff that's on the plate. A lot more is going to be on the plate as we go forward for the next couple of days. This stuff with Donald Trump isn't going to go away easily, but we look forward to talking to you all on Friday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. We'll see you all then.